Greetings, my friends, and welcome back to Forgotten Ties. We have a truly harrowing story for you today, one that proves some family secrets are buried for a reason, and that sometimes a simple discovery can shatter the very foundation of your existence. This isn't a story for the faint of heart. It's a story about a man who thought he knew his life, his parents, his whole world, only to find out it was all a meticulously crafted lie. Our tale begins with a man named Arthur, a quiet, unassuming accountant in his late 30s. Arthur had what you might call a perfect life. A loving wife, 2 beautiful children, a cozy suburban home in a tranquil neighborhood in Ohio. His parents, Robert and Eleanor, were the epitome of doting grandparents, always there for family dinners, Sunday barbecues, and school plays. They were his rock, his source of unconditional love and support. They had always told him stories of his birth, a difficult but joyous event in their small-town hospital. It was a normal, happy life, or so he thought. The catalyst for this entire nightmare was a seemingly mundane task: cleaning out his parents' basement. They were getting older, and the clutter had become overwhelming. Arthur, being the dutiful son, volunteered to help. He spent a Saturday afternoon sifting through old boxes filled with childhood toys, dusty photo albums, and forgotten holiday decorations. It was a nostalgic journey, a pleasant walk down memory lane, until he found it. Tucked away behind an old, broken-down washing machine, there was a small, ornate wooden box. It was unlike anything else in the basement. It wasn't dusty or water-stained. It looked as though it had been recently placed there, carefully hidden from sight. He tried to open it, but it was locked. No key. Arthur, being a man of routine and order, was immediately intrigued. He picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy, the wood smooth and cool to the touch. It was then that he noticed the small, almost imperceptible engraving on the lid. The letters M were etched into the wood, a detail that sent a strange shiver down his spine. Arthur, of course, was Arthur Miller, but his parents' names were Robert and Eleanor Miller. The initials didn't make any sense. He dismissed it as a coincidence, perhaps a memento from a distant relative. But the feeling of unease lingered. The next time he visited, he brought his own set of tools, a simple lockpick set he'd bought on a whim a few years prior and never used. He told his mother he needed to fix a squeaky door in the garage, a small white lie that felt heavy on his tongue. He went down to the basement, his heart thumping in his chest, and began to work on the lock. It was an old lock, but a stubborn one. Minutes stretched into an eternity. He was a man of logic and reason, not mystery and suspense. Yet here he was, crouched in a dimly lit basement, a silent accomplice to his own curiosity. Finally, with a soft click, the lock gave way. He opened the lid, his breath catching in his throat. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, pristine document. It was his birth certificate. Arthur's own birth certificate. This was odd. He had always known his parents kept his official documents in a safe deposit box at the bank. Why would this one be hidden here? He picked it up, the paper crisp against his fingertips. As he scanned the document, the familiar details were there. His name, Arthur James Miller. His date of birth, May 15, 1988. His place of birth, St. Jude's Hospital. Everything seemed normal, everything, until he reached the section for mother's name and father's name. The names listed were not Robert and Eleanor Miller. They were Mary Beth and Vincent Hayes. His world went silent. The sounds of the furnace humming, the distant traffic, the playful laughter of his children upstairs, all of it faded into a deafening roar in his head. He read the names again and again and again, as if the repetition would change them back to the names he had always known. But they didn't. They remained Mary Beth and Vincent Hayes, strangers on a piece of paper that was supposed to represent the very beginning of his life. A life that, in that moment, felt like a complete and total fabrication. The initials AM on the box now made perfect, terrifying sense. Arthur Miller, but what did M stand for? He stumbled out of the basement, the birth certificate clutched in his hand, a cold, heavy weight. He looked at his mother, Eleanor, as she was setting the table for dinner, her smile warm and genuine. He looked at his father, Robert, watching a baseball game on TV, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He saw the love, the care, the years of devotion, and for the first time he saw a different possibility. Was it a mistake? A clerical error? Or was it something far more sinister? A web of lies so deep and so old that he had never even suspected its existence? His mind raced, a chaotic storm of questions with no answers. The unease he had felt in the basement was nothing compared to the gut-wrenching dread that now settled in his stomach. The perfect life he had built was a house of cards, and this single piece of paper was the wind that threatened to blow it all down. He had to know the truth. He had to confront them. But how? How do you ask the two people who raised you and loved you unconditionally, "Who are my real parents?" It was a question that felt impossible to ask, a question that would change everything forever. And this was just the beginning. The air in the house grew thick with unspoken tension. Arthur couldn't bring himself to sit down for dinner. He just stood there, the birth certificate a crumpled protest in his hand. His parents, sensing something was wrong, stopped what they were doing. Eleanor's smile faltered, and Robert turned off the television. "Arthur, what's wrong?" Eleanor asked, her voice filled with concern. Arthur's throat was dry. He couldn't force the words out. He simply unfolded the document and laid it on the kitchen counter, pushing it towards them. Their faces, so familiar, so full of love, went pale. Robert's eyes, usually twinkling with good humor, widened in shock. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, a silent, horrified gasp. It was in that moment, in the silence that followed, that Arthur knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was a secret, a deep, dark, and carefully guarded secret. "Who are Mary Beth and Vincent Hayes?" he asked, his voice shaking. "And why are their names on my birth certificate?" Eleanor started to cry, silent tears that streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. Robert, ever the stoic one, put his arm around her. "Arthur," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "Son, we should have told you." The word son felt hollow, a lie on his father's lips. The truth spilled out in a torrent of painful admissions. They had always wanted children, but Eleanor was unable to conceive. They had tried for years, a decade of heartbreak and dashed hopes. Then, they met a woman named Mary Beth. She was a young, struggling waitress, pregnant and alone, with no family to support her. Mary Beth and Vincent, her boyfriend at the time, were just teenagers. They were overwhelmed and terrified. They couldn't provide for a child. Robert and Eleanor, desperate for a baby, saw a chance. They made a deal. They would give Mary Beth and Vincent a large sum of money, a new life in another city, and in exchange they would get the baby. They forged a new birth certificate, or so they thought, and had a lawyer handle the adoption in secret. They changed their names on the document and had everything officially sealed. Or so they had believed. They were so consumed by their desire for a child that they overlooked one crucial detail. The original birth certificate, the one with his biological parents' names, somehow wasn't sealed or destroyed. It was given to them in that locked box by a lawyer who had since passed away, with instructions to keep it safe until Arthur was old enough to know the truth. They had intended to tell him one day, on his 21st birthday, then his 30th, but they kept putting it off, afraid of his reaction, afraid of losing the bond they had built. Arthur listened, his mind reeling. He was a transaction, a business deal. The love, the family, it was all built on a foundation of a lie. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just by his parents, but by the universe itself. "Why didn't you just adopt me legally?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why the lies? Why the forgery?" Robert explained that in those days the process was complicated, and they were afraid of being rejected. They had heard of a gray market for adoptions and, in their desperation, they had taken a shortcut, trusting a shady lawyer who promised to make it all disappear. And for 37 years it had disappeared. But now it was back, and with a vengeance. Eleanor pulled him into a hug, her tears soaking his shirt. "Please, Arthur, don't hate us," she sobbed. "We love you. You are our son. Nothing will ever change that." Arthur felt a rush of conflicting emotions. He was angry, heartbroken, and confused, but he couldn't deny the love they had shown him. Their betrayal was born out of love, a twisted, desperate love, but love nonetheless. He couldn't hate them, not entirely, but he couldn't just accept it either. He had two new names, two new ghosts to hunt down. Mary Beth and Vincent Hayes. He had to find them. He had to know who they were and what had become of them. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and obsessive research. Arthur couldn't focus on work. The spreadsheet numbers blurred into a meaningless haze. He was consumed by his search for Mary Beth and Vincent Hayes. He started with online databases, searching for any combination of their names, but came up empty. He was a ghost hunter with no ghosts to chase. The names were too common. He hit dead ends everywhere he looked. He was about to give up when he remembered a detail from his parents' confession. The lawyer, the man who had handled the adoption, had passed away, but his law firm still existed. Arthur took a day off from work, a lie he easily justified, and drove to the firm. He spoke to a young receptionist who looked at him with polite confusion. The records from that far back were archived, she explained, and without a court order, they couldn't be accessed. But as he turned to leave, a senior partner, a man with a kind face and silver hair, overheard his story. The name of the deceased lawyer, Thomas Sterling, rang a bell. "I was his junior partner," the man said. "He had a few unusual cases. Give me a day. I'll see what I can find." A day later, Arthur received a call. The senior partner had found something. A file, sealed and marked confidential, with the initials AM, a file that Sterling had kept separate from the official firm records. It contained a letter, written by Thomas Sterling himself, detailing the events of Arthur's adoption. It confirmed everything his parents had told him: the desperate couple, the terrified teenagers, the transaction. But it also contained something else, something that chilled Arthur to the bone. A single, small black and white photograph. It was of a young woman, no more than 18, with striking, intelligent eyes and a warm smile. Below it, in Sterling's neat, elegant handwriting, were two words: Mary Beth, 1988. And on the back of the photo, in a different hand, a handwritten note: "You promised to keep him safe." There was another document in the file, a medical report. It was for Mary Beth Hayes. It mentioned a rare genetic blood disorder, one that could be passed down to her child. The disorder was not life-threatening, but it required specific care and medication. Arthur's parents had never told him he had a medical condition. He had always been a healthy child, a healthy adult. But a quick Google search revealed that the condition often lay dormant, only to manifest in times of extreme stress. Suddenly, the strange bouts of exhaustion and dizziness he had experienced in the past few months, which he had dismissed as overwork, took on a terrifying new meaning. The perfect life was not only a lie, but it was also a ticking time bomb. The senior partner then told him something else, something about Vincent Hayes. He had vanished shortly after the adoption, leaving Mary Beth to start over alone. Mary Beth, however, had stayed in the state, just in a different city. Sterling's note contained a last known address for her: a small apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. Arthur knew what he had to do. He had to find her. He had to see the woman who had brought him into this world. He had to look into those eyes from the photograph and ask her why. Why she gave him up, why she didn't fight for him, and if she ever, even for a moment, regretted it. The drive to the apartment building was a quiet, contemplative one. Arthur's mind was a maelstrom of emotions: fear, hope, anger, and a deep-seated longing for answers. He found the address: a quaint, two-story building with a small garden in the front. He buzzed the number on the note, his heart pounding in his chest. An elderly woman's voice answered, "Hello." He hesitated, then spoke the name: "Mary Beth Hayes?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "My name is Arthur. I think I'm your son." The door buzzed open, and Arthur walked up the stairs, each step a testament to the years of lies that had led him here. She was waiting at the door, a woman with kind eyes that were a mirror of his own. She was older, her hair a mix of salt and pepper, but in her eyes he could still see the girl from the photograph. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know whether to hug her, to yell at her, or to simply fall to his knees. She invited him in, and they sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. Then, she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew one day you would come. I prayed you would." She told him her side of the story, a story of teenage love and betrayal. Vincent, his biological father, was a cruel and selfish man. When he found out she was pregnant, he panicked and left, disappearing into the night, never to be heard from again. She was alone, scared, and in a difficult position. The Millers offered her a way out, a chance for her baby to have a life she couldn't provide. She had a difficult pregnancy, and the baby was born with a rare medical condition, a severe, life-threatening heart defect. The Millers had a choice. They could turn their backs on the baby, or they could save him. They chose to save him. The forged documents, the secret adoption, it wasn't for their benefit alone. It was to protect Arthur. The medical treatment he needed was complex and expensive. The Millers, a wealthy family, had arranged for the best doctors and hospitals, all under the radar. The birth certificate was hidden to protect his medical privacy. The name change, the whole charade, was to ensure that if anything were to happen to his biological parents, the complex medical care he needed would not be disrupted. The condition was genetic, but it had to be a perfect storm of genes to be so severe. It was her genes and Vincent's combined. The doctors had given him a grim prognosis. He wouldn't live past his teens. He was, in a way, a miracle baby. But the miracle was thanks to Robert and Eleanor, who had sacrificed everything to give him a chance at life. Arthur was stunned. The story he had concocted in his head, the story of lies and betrayal, was a half-truth. His life wasn't a transaction. It was a sacrifice. He looked at the woman in front of him, his birth mother, and saw not a traitor, but a hero. A woman who, in her own way, had loved him enough to let him go, to give him a chance at a life she couldn't provide. He learned that Vincent, his biological father, had died years ago, a victim of a drug overdose, a tragic ending to a sad life. He was a non-factor. He spent hours with Mary Beth, learning about his biological family, his grandparents, and the family history he never knew he had. He found a new sense of self, a sense of belonging he didn't know was missing. He returned home that night, not with anger, but with a new understanding, a new love for the two people who had raised him. He told them everything he had learned, and they embraced him, their family finally whole, finally built on a foundation of truth. He finally understood the full picture of the love they had for him, a love that was so deep and so selfless it had compelled them to go to extreme lengths to protect him. And so, my friends, Arthur's story serves as a profound reminder. The truth is often more complex than we can ever imagine. It's a testament to the power of love, the strength of the human spirit, and the enduring bonds of family, whether by blood or by choice. If this story touched you, if it made you think, please do us a favor. Take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the Forgotten Ties channel, and be sure to ring that bell so you never miss another heart-wrenching story. Your support helps us continue to share these incredible tales, and we couldn't do it without you.